$224. That is every last cent I put into the solar setup running in my own workshop right now, filling a battery with sunlight every clear day, and handing that power back to me whenever I flip the switch. Walk into any hardware store or scroll through any shopping site, and a store-bought power station built to do that same job will run you $600 on the cheap end and $1,500 or better if you want one built to last. Same job, same sunlight falling free out of the sky. A difference of $400, sometimes closer to $1,300, for the exact same result. And here is the part that ought to bother you more than the price tag ever could. The day that sealed-up box finally quits on you, and every battery quits eventually, you cannot open it. You cannot fix it. You mail it back if the warranty has not run out, or more likely, you set it by the curb and buy another one. What I'm going to show you today is not that box. It is 5 plain parts, sitting loose on my workbench, wired together by my own 2 hands, and when one of those parts wears out 10 years from now, I pull that one part, order a new one for a few dollars, and I am back in business by supper time. I am going to walk you through every part, the actual wiring, step by step, the honest reason each piece does what it does. And I am going to be straight with you about the one thing a setup like this will not do, because I would rather you hear that plainly from me than find it out the hard way after you have already spent your money. And partway through, I want to tell you about the very first time I ever saw a battery filled up by something other than a wall plug, out behind my grandfather's barn, years before anybody around here called it solar power. Stick with me for that part. Let's get into it. Now, before I show you a single wire, I want you to understand exactly what you are paying for when you buy one of those finished power stations, because once you see it plainly, the rest of this makes complete sense. Inside that plastic case is a battery, wrapped up with a small circuit board that watches over it, called a battery management board. That board is the reason the whole unit works, and it is also the reason the whole unit dies. Because that board and the battery cells wired to it are built as one sealed piece, matched to that exact model, in that exact production year. When one cell in there goes weak, which happens to every lithium battery eventually, the manufacturer does not sell you a replacement cell. Most of them do not sell you a replacement battery pack at all. You are told to send in the whole unit, or you are told, politely, that the model has been discontinued and parts are no longer available. My neighbor Harold ran into exactly this 3 years back. He paid $649 for a power station built to hold about 500 watt-hours, enough for his shop lights and charging a few tools of an evening. When the battery weakened this past spring, the company quoted him $310 for a replacement pack, if he shipped the old unit in and waited 6 weeks. $310 to fix half of a $649 box. Now, here is what I built instead, for the exact same 500 watt-hours of storage. A deep cycle marine battery, $65. A 100-watt solar panel, $85. A 20-amp charge controller, $22. A 300-watt inverter, $35. And wire, a fuse, connectors, and a plastic tote to house it all, $17. Add that up and you get $224 for a system built from 5 separate parts that any hardware store or supplier still carries, and will keep carrying, because none of them were built to lock you into one company's replacement price. Folks hear the word solar, and their mind jumps straight to something complicated, something you would need an engineering degree to understand. That is not an accident. It is easier to sell you a finished box for $1,000 if you believe the insides are a mystery only a company can solve. The truth is plainer than that, and it is worth saying outright. There are 5 parts to any setup like this, and every single one of them does exactly one job. The battery is the tank. It is where the sunlight ends up stored, waiting for you to use it. The solar panel is the collector. Its only task is turning sunlight into the low, gentle kind of electricity a battery can hold. The charge controller sits between those two, and its job is to fill the battery wisely, never too fast, never past full, because a battery filled carelessly is a battery ruined, or worse. The inverter is the translator. The power sitting in that battery is not the kind your household things expect, so the inverter turns it into the ordinary plug-in current a lamp or a charger is built to use. And the 5th part, the one most setups skip and regret skipping, is a simple battery monitor. A small gauge that tells you exactly how full your tank is, the same way a fuel gauge tells you what is left in a truck. 5 parts, 5 plain jobs. And every one of them can be bought on its own, from more than one supplier, for the rest of your life. So let me show you exactly how these 5 parts go together, because seeing it done takes all the mystery out of it. Start with the panel. You want it facing the midday sun, the south-facing wall or roofline if you are anywhere in our part of the country, tilted up toward the sky rather than laid flat, and kept clear of any shade, because even a little shadow across one corner of a panel cuts its output badly. Run the wire from the panel in through a vent or a drilled hole, and connect it to the charge controller first, before anything else is hooked up. From the charge controller, run a second pair of wires to the battery, positive to positive, negative to negative, and I want you to say that out loud to yourself while you are doing it, because crossing those 2 wires is exactly how you get sparks and a ruined part. Close to the battery, and I mean close, no more than a few inches of wire away, install your fuse. That fuse is a sacrificial link. If anything downstream ever shorts out, that fuse burns through first and stops the fault right there, instead of letting it turn into a fire. From the other side of the battery, run your last pair of wires to the inverter. Crimp every connector on tight, because a loose connection is a warm connection, and a warm connection left alone long enough is how house fires start. Once every wire is landed, panel to controller, controller to battery, fuse on the battery, battery to inverter, you check every connection twice, and only then do you bring it to life. Now, a lot of folks assume a bigger solar panel number on the label always means more power delivered to the battery, and that is not quite true, and it is worth understanding why. A 100-watt panel only makes its full 100 watts in direct, bright, midday sun, hitting it straight on. Add cloud cover, a low winter sun, or a panel angled wrong, and that same panel might hand you 20 or 30 watts instead, on the exact same afternoon. That is not a flaw in the panel. That is just how sunlight works, and it is why I always tell people to build in some cushion, rather than sizing a system down to the bare minimum. The charge controller matters more than people give it credit for too. A cheap controller just lets power flow through more or less unregulated, which works fine until the battery gets close to full, and then it can overcharge cells that were never meant to take that much. A proper controller tapers the charge down as the battery fills, the same way you would ease off a water spigot as a bucket gets close to the top, so the battery lasts years longer than it would otherwise. And on the battery itself, you have a real choice to make. A lead-acid deep-cycle battery is the cheaper way in, and it will do the job, but it does not like being drained past half-empty very often, and it does not love the cold. A lithium iron phosphate battery costs more up front, but it can be drained much further without harm. It handles cold better, and it will outlast a lead-acid battery several times over. Either one will run the setup I am showing you. Which one is right depends entirely on what you can spend today, versus what you would rather not replace in 5 years. I want to tell you now about the first time I ever saw a battery filled up by anything besides a plug in a wall, because it was not a solar panel at all, and it happened long before any of us around here used that word. My grandfather kept an old truck generator bolted to a plank behind the barn, wired up to a bicycle wheel and a length of belt, and on a still evening, one of us grandchildren would take turns pedaling that wheel while he watched the meter and told us when the truck battery had taken enough. That battery ran the one bare bulb in the milking parlor, nothing more, and nothing less was expected of it. I remember asking him once why he did not just run a wire out from the house current instead, since the house had electricity by then, and he told me it was not really about the light at all. He said a man ought to know exactly where his power comes from and exactly how to fix the thing that makes it, and pedaling a wheel taught a boy that lesson a good deal better than flipping a switch ever would. When that old generator's coil finally burned out one winter, he did not throw it away. He pulled it apart on the kitchen table over 2 evenings, rewound the coil himself with wire he ordered from a catalog, and put it right back to work for another decade. I think about that generator every time I bolt a new solar panel to a bracket, because the sun sitting on my roof is doing the exact same job that bicycle wheel did, just without anybody's legs getting tired, and the whole spirit behind it. Building a thing you understand and can put right yourself has not changed one bit. Now let me show you how to size one of these for your own place, because guessing is how people either overspend or end up short on a cloudy week. Start by being honest about what you actually want to run. Say you want 3 shop lights, 10 watts each, for 4 hours of an evening. That is 30 watts times 4 hours, which comes to 120 watt-hours a day. A battery holding around 200 watt-hours gives you a full night with room to spare, even on a day the sun does not fully cooperate. To fill that battery back up, a single 100-watt panel, getting 4 or 5 good hours of real sun, hands back somewhere around 400 watt-hours on a decent day, more than enough to refill what you used and bank a little extra against a grey day to follow. Now say instead you wanted to run a small chest freezer, one that cycles on and off through the day rather than running constant. That is a heavier load, and it deserves a bigger battery and a bigger panel, or better yet, 2 panels, to keep up with it through a run of cloudy days. My honest advice, the same advice I would give my own sons, is to start with the smaller load. Build the shop light system first, live with it through a full season, and you will learn more about what you actually use in a month of watching that gauge than any amount of figuring on paper could teach you. Once you know that, adding a second battery or a second panel for a bigger job is simple, because you already understand every part in front of you. Now I have to stop here and say some things plainly, because this is electrical work, and electrical work done carelessly can burn a building down or hurt somebody badly, and I will not gloss over that to make any of this sound easier than it is. Get your polarity right every single time, positive to positive, negative to negative, because crossing those wires is exactly how you get sparks and ruined parts, and worse. Use wire thick enough for the current you are asking it to carry. Wire that is too thin heats up, and wire that heats up long enough can melt its own insulation and start a fire, quietly, often overnight, when nobody is watching. Put your fuse close to the battery, always, so that any fault gets stopped right there, instead of traveling further down the line. Keep a lithium battery somewhere dry and open to the air, never sealed up tight in a hot enclosure, because those batteries can burn fierce and hard to put out if something does go wrong inside one. And here is the plainest thing I can tell you. If you are not fully sure of your own wiring, do not guess, and do not power it up to test your luck. I am not a licensed electrician, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Have a knowledgeable hand, an electrician, an experienced neighbor, somebody who actually knows this work. Look over your connections before you ever bring that battery to life. A checked box beats a burnt shed every single time, and there is no shame at all in asking for that second set of eyes. Now, I can already hear somebody thinking, if this works so well, why doesn't everybody just do this instead of paying the power company every month? And that is a fair question, and I owe you an honest answer rather than a sales pitch. This setup, built the size I have shown you today, is not going to run your whole house. It is not going to run a central air conditioner, an electric stove, or a house full of heavy appliances all pulling at once. To get anywhere near that, you would need a great deal more battery and a great many more panels than we are talking about here, and the cost climbs steeply once you go down that road. What this setup is built for, and built for well, is a specific job. Shop lights, a well pump, a fan in the root cellar, keeping a few needful things running through a storm when the grid itself goes dark. Think of it as a good, sturdy wagon, not a locomotive, and it will never disappoint you, because you never asked it to be something it was never meant to be. And one more honest word, a cloudy stretch of a week or more will draw your battery down faster than it fills, same as it would for anybody's setup, mine included. Build in a little extra panel and a little extra battery beyond your bare daily need. Precisely so, a run of grey days does not leave you short. Respect that limit going in, and this will serve you faithfully for years. Ignore it, and you will feel let down by a tool that was honest about its own limits from the very start. I want to warn you about something in the store-bought power station business, because it is quiet, and it costs people real money, and almost nobody points it out plainly. A good many of those companies redesign their battery pack and their charging plug with nearly every new model they release, even when the old design worked just fine. That means the solar panel and the charging cable you bought 2 years ago for one model will often not fit the replacement unit the same company sells you today, even though nothing about the sun or the wiring actually changed. You are not buying an upgrade. You are being quietly nudged into buying the whole system over again. And watch closely for how these units list their power rating too. A good many list a peak wattage number in bold on the box, a burst the unit can only manage for a few seconds, right beside a much smaller, continuous wattage number in fine print, which is the number that actually matters for running anything for more than a moment. Building your own system, the way I showed you today, sidesteps both of those tricks entirely. A battery is a battery. A plug is a plug. Nobody redesigns the physics of a bus bar to force you into a new one, and every part I priced out for you today lists its continuous rating plainly, because there is no sealed box and no marketing department standing between you and the actual specification. So here is exactly how I would have you start. In order. Step 1. Sit down and honestly total the watt hours of the one job you want this to do. The shop lights, the well pump, whatever it is on your own place, the same way I walked through a moment ago. Step 2. Buy your 5 parts to match that number, starting modest rather than grand: a battery, a panel, a charge controller, an inverter, and a fuse with the right wire. Step 3. Wire it up in good daylight, fuse close to the battery, polarity check twice, and, if you have any doubt at all, get a knowledgeable hand to look it over before you power it up. Step 4. Live with that small system for a full season before you build a second one for a different job. Let the first one teach you what the second one actually needs. That is the whole path, in the order that keeps you safe and keeps you from overspending on the very first try. So there you have it. $224 in 5 plain parts, against $600 or more for a sealed box that owes you nothing once the warranty runs out. A battery to hold it, a panel to catch it, a controller to fill it wisely, an inverter to make it useful, and a gauge to tell you what you have got left. Built modest, built for one honest job at a time, and built so that when a part finally wears out, and every part eventually does, you are the one who fixes it, not the one who throws it away. My grandfather taught me that a man ought to be the master of his own tools, and there is no tool that teaches that lesson better than one you built with your own 2 hands and can put right again yourself. If you have got a load on your own place you would set free first, tell me down in the comments what it is. The shop, the pump, the root cellar fan, I read every one of them. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I will see you in the next one.